Hello everybody, how you doing? This is Coach Fleischer. We're at Kinesiology 214, Module 2, Session 4. It's a continuation of a previous presentation talking about ways to measure or evaluate performance. For this presentation, it's more specific towards strength training. In one of the other ones, we talked a little bit more about cardiovascular adaptations and how the heart adapts to training. Make no mistake about it, the heart actually does adapt to strength training as well with a thickening of the ventricular walls, but it's a different condition, et cetera, and it has a totally different set of slides and information that goes into it. For this presentation, we're talking more about how to evaluate one's ability to push weight around. And specifically, we're looking at types of maxes and then tonnage. And you look at how you can actually evaluate performance and types of maxes, one of which is an absolute max. There's a training or floating max, and then there's a test out max. And so the absolute max, it's a little bit theoretical. I'll talk a little bit about it here in a second. Training and floating, that kind of moves around. And test out is more of a target, like a longer term target date for a max effort. And if we really break this down, your absolute, and I like to start off with absolute because it kind of gives you a framework of what you can and can't do. And for the absolute max, it's kind of theoretical. It's based off of things like your fiber type. Did you choose the right parents to fulfill the goal that you're looking to accomplish, like to bench press a lot of weight or squat a lot of weight or power clean? Do you have the right fiber typing, the right somatotype, et cetera, which all comes from your genetic pool? And then it really presents this kind of absolute ceiling on training potential. Now, granted, if you have wonderful environmental situation where you have perfect home life, or even if you're living in a training type of community, you work, sleep, eat, drink, training all day long, and you have this ability just to wrap yourself around training optimally for a particular event, that will give you the chance, the ability to get to your absolute max. And that even changed a little bit too, as we age and get older. When you're younger, your ability gets greater and greater and greater, and as you start to crest and get older and older and older, your ability gets less and less and less. So even absolute has a little bit of a moving target component to it. Training and floating, I use this with my other classes with an app that I used. It's the formula is called an Epley formula, named after Boyd Epley. He was one of the people who really was at the forefront of strength and conditioning before other people thought it was a good idea to have people in a weight room. But the Epley formula and others like it, we'll use a real basic one for this class, gives you the ability to mathematically calculate a maximum for any exercise based off the weight and the number of reps that you use for that exercise. And your training and floating max is something that does vacillate. It varies from day to day, and it's based upon any number of stressors. If it's finals week, or if there's issues at home, or you're not getting enough sleep, or you're working too much, or any number of those things. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second in terms of my experience with those types of maxes. And test out, usually by coaches will map out a 12-week mesocycle and say, we're going to map out, we're going to work out, we're going to map this out, we're going to target, I don't know, a particular day and time, and I want everybody to bench, everybody to squat, and everybody to power clean on that day. And athletes work diligently towards that goal, and you would hope that the coach actually is using prudent program design and mapping out a good rep and set periodization schedule to get them, lead those athletes to that 1 rep max attempt, and not having them do like high rep workouts and then trying to max out somewhere 12 weeks down the road, which is counterintuitive, as you know. So if we look at this in terms of just over time, right, big picture, absolute, that's your ceiling on performance no matter what. That floating max kind of just floats along, and over time, as you place stressors on the muscles adapt, they get stronger, and actually your ability to push weight gets better and better and better. And with a test out max, you're trying to target a particular date in the future. So now if you program this correctly, what will happen is you'll end up having, if you were to test out at any given time, that test out max would lag a little bit behind that floating max because you're applying a training stimulus and your body would not be actually prepped for a test out attempt until you get deep into that mesocycle, as you get closer and closer to your test out. Just think about it. If you're doing sets of 10, sets of 8, sets of 6, sets of 4, sets of 3, 2, heavy singles, and then you're testing out here, it just makes sense that you're training your body more specifically to get the training response of actually maxing out, where here you're not. And you'll see this in the math later on. I also want to point out, when you're early on in a training program, you might have your newer participants will have greater gains early on than people who've been around for a while, because people who have been around for a while, they're literally trying to work diligently just to eke out another % gain or 2% gain over time, over a 12-week time. And that's noticeable to somebody who's like an elite level weightlifter. To somebody who's brand new to working out, this curve is very common. And the example I like to give is, years ago when I coached, I had Antoine Thrift and Sully. Sully was an offensive lineman. He was a freshman. He never worked out. He was somebody who was over here. Antoine was a senior. Sully weighed about 300 pounds and couldn't bench his body weight and couldn't squat and couldn't power clean, much more beyond that as well. Whereas Antoine over here was a 175-pound running back who was a senior who had been working out the majority of his life. And as a result, he was able to bench twice his body weight, squat about 2.5 times his body weight, and power clean twice his body weight. So pound for pound, he had to move more weight every workout than Sully did to get the training response. And Sully actually had to learn more and have his body go through a learning curve of learning how to adapt to a training program, where Antoine was good to go. So realize somebody like Antoine was a gifted athlete who was much closer to his absolute max because he had gone through a quadrennial 4-year program and had been through this curve, where Sully was a freshman at the time. He was brand new to training. He was operating over here, but he saw big gains. He really did. He saw a lot of strength gains. And as he got into his junior and senior year, he actually started to flatten out like everybody else does. But this is where you put in your higher volume, higher rep, if you will, workouts to create the volume and the base for people to actually have strong training gains later on in a program. I digress. Let's get back to what we're talking about here. And what we're most interested in this class, and you'll see this with your clients, is that floating max, because it can be affected by a number of different stressors. You're not in an optimal environment. Usually your clients will not be trained and taken into a direction where you're doing an absolute 1-rep max. And it's a real quick and dirty way when somebody does an exercise, you can give them an answer. Well, how much is that? What do I max? What is my max my bench press? Because you can take information that you have at your fingertips and really map it out. Now, this coefficient does change depending if you're doing 15 reps all the way down to 1 rep. But for this class, and just for sake of conversation, this is about the easiest way to calculate this out. So a person does a set of 10 on a bench press, right? And they're doing 140 pounds. So if they're doing 10 reps, you take that coefficient 0.03 times it by 10. I'm sorry, I know you probably thought you'd never have to have algebra again in your life, but here it is. So you have sets of 10, and you have 0.03 per. That gives you 0.3. So you go 1 minus that 0.3 equals 70 or 70%. So if you're doing sets of 10, and please, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, just remember sets of 10 are usually done at about 70%. So if a person is pushing around 140 pounds and they're getting number 10 and they can't get any more, what is their 1-rep max if you were to calculate it? Well, if you're working at 70%, their 1-rep max is 200 pounds because it's 140 divided by 0.7. So do the math again to calculate this out. Now, here's the quirky thing about this, right? You can always calculate back and forth, and if you want to do a workout based off a 200-pound max, you times it by 0.7. If you want to do a workout based off of a 210-pound max, you go 0.7 times 210, that'll give you a workout weight. Conversely, if you know that that's the weight you're working at, you can figure out what that training weight should be or what the max would be in that situation. So it's kind of quirky in terms of like using algebra to figure things out, but actually it's really helpful once you start playing with the numbers a little bit. And the way I always describe this is if you want to increase that floating max, right? You have a client who's working out and they're asked to complete 10 reps. So they do 10 reps and they end up doing 12 instead. They're stronger than what you had prescribed. Also, if a person is asked to do 10 reps with a particular weight, but they do 10 more pounds, you also know they got stronger. And so the way to look at this is through a term called tonnage, and I'll get this here in a second. Tonnage is just a mathematical calculation of how much weight you actually move, right? So you got 50 pounds and you move it 10 times. Well, if you go 50 pounds 10 times, that's 500 pounds. So a set of 10 with 50-pound dumbbells will actually be moving 500 pounds over time. That's a lot of work if you think back to our work versus power equation. And if you have 3 sets of 10, well, at 50 pounds, that's going to be that number times 3 or 1,500. So got it. Now, if I do 3 sets of 10 at 55 pounds, I've moved more weight. The math supports that you're actually stronger and able to do more work than was actually prescribed. So as a participant or a person who is working with somebody, you can manipulate the reps and the sets, and you can calculate out the actual workloads and compare them to determine what is a hard workout, what is a medium workout, and what is an easy workout for your clients. Holy smokes, that's a lot of math, I know. But if we look at this and we get into this a little bit deeper, and we go with the number of reps completed, I'm asked to do 3 sets of 10 at 30 reps at 50 pounds. Well, that's going to be 1,500 total pounds of work. Okay, but what if I do more reps? And I do 3 sets of 12 that's going to be 36 total reps at 50 pounds. Hey, that's 1,800 pounds of total work done. Over here, we already know 3 sets of 10 is 30 reps, 50 pounds, 1,500 pounds. We scroll it down a little bit. This one yields out 1,650. So in theory, right, what's happening here is all things being equal, you end up doing more reps, you're doing more work. But it's a bit of a misnomer because as you get stronger, you almost have like this leapfrog effect from one side to the other where you're doing more reps, you can eke out another rep. That means your next one you actually should be doing more weight. You do more weight, you get to the point where you get stronger, you do more reps. So this kind of floats back and forth between these two when you calculate tonnage and use that as a way to measure your performance. So here's a devious kind of exam question, right? If I were to throw this at you, because you guys are all smart. If you look at this and you go, all right, if you want to move 1,800 pounds versus 1,500 pounds for 3 sets of 10, well, you know, 3 sets of 10 is 30 pounds. What would that workout weight need to be? Well, you know, if you do the math backwards to get to 1,800 pounds at 3 sets of 10, it's going to be, well, it's not going to be a Hummer or a couple farm animals. It's going to be 60-pound dumbbells. That's going to be your winner. So where that takes us is this. When we have this laid out in kind of a spreadsheet coefficient format, you look at this, you have a number of reps a person completed here, the coefficient 0.03 per each, and then it gives you the calculated amount for each coefficient times reps, right? So you have 4 reps times 0.03 gives you 0.12. This 1 rep max is 1 minus this, 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 etc. So you can see as you're going through this, if a person does 4 reps, they're actually working at about 88% of their 1 rep max. If a person does 6 reps, they're actually about 82% of a 1 rep max. For our class, and to keep things ultra simple, if they're working at 10 reps, they're roughly at about 70% of a 1 rep max. Now, this does slide. When you get further to the right here, this coefficient starts to get a little bit tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter because it has to. You know it has to, because if you're doing a 1 rep attempt, it's not going to be 97, it's going to be closer to 99. So this would actually be 0.01, right? Will be your per rep coefficient, which will give you a 99% here. So just keep that in mind. If this does slide in the real world, but for the sake of our class, 0.03 per rep, 10 reps gives you 70% of a 1 rep max. Now, your takeaways are that, right? 3 sets of 10 is or are 30 reps. Sets of 10 are 70% of 1 rep max, and floating max can be calculated at any time if the reps and the weight are known. Got it? Good. Signing off. Gotta go pet my dog.